because global economy. Still like right. It's like a super
Hey, while the projector is starting up, let me get started. See some familiar. Yes, I see some familiar faces around. How many of you are in my corporate finance class? You came back for more punishment? What's wrong with you? Eh? The rest of you were not in my corporate. How many of you are not full-time MBAs? So Langone, etc. How many of you are not at the Stern School? You're in another graduate school? Anybody here? Okay. Just a note of caution, much of the stuff that happens in this class, if you want to get on the Google shared, for instance, the shared spreadsheets that I send you would require a Stern email address. And if you're not at Stern, you don't have one, I will send you actually a little way of, there is a Stern email address that's created for you the moment you join a Stern class. I want you to be aware of that because that way you'll make sure you get emails and also that you can get on Capital IQ, be able to get data. So you should get that with an email after class today. So with no further ado, this is valuation. I hope you're in the right class. In case you're not, this is the time to leave. And it's been an interesting day, right? How does a company lose almost $1 trillion in market cap in one day? Well, you found out today, right? Can one thing happening over the weekend change your entire perspective on what's coming in the future? Yes, right? We live in interesting times, and that's why I guess the Chinese have that as a curse. May you live in interesting times. Now, this has always been an interesting class to teach. A little bit of history of this class. I came to NYU in 1986. I'm getting old. My kids remind me of this, and I'm reminded every time I get in an elevator and I run into somebody whose parent went through this class. Thank God no grandparents yet, but it's only a matter of time. But when I came to NYU in 1986, I was given a class to teach. It was called security analysis. Heard of this class? It's a class with a very long and hoary tradition. Class that was taught at Columbia University by a guy called Ben Graham. If you haven't heard of Ben, you've heard of his most famous student. Any names? Warren Buffett. A class. He had a class of only 5 people. I don't know, either he was not a very good teacher or had very restrictive requirements to get into his class. It's a class that had been taught since the 1950s. So 1986, they give me this class to teach. I take one look at the class and my response, I don't want to teach this class. Most boring class ever. Because by 1986, it was showing its age. It was 4 weeks on stocks and 3 weeks on bonds and 2 weeks on futures and options and 5 weeks on institutional detail. Like what? There was an entire session on listing requirements for the New York Stock Exchange. Teaching was so easy in the days before Wikipedia. You could actually go in front of a classroom, list out all the requirements. Remember, these were the days people had to take everything down. There were no slides. And you could walk out looking like a genius. I couldn't even try that anymore. So I went to the head of my department and I said, I don't want to teach this class. Terrible attitude for an assistant professor. He should have fired me on the spot, but he was a good guy. He said, what would you like to teach instead? I said, I'd like to teach a valuation class. He said, don't do it. He said, there isn't enough stuff in valuation to fill a class. And you know what? He was absolutely right. In 1986, there wasn't enough stuff in valuation to fill a class. You know the only valuation book that was out there? A book called Security Analysis, written by Ben Graham. You know what, when the first edition of the book was? What year? 1934. And I want you to think about that. What was happening, you think, in 1934 in the US? You're coming off the Great Depression, right? If you read security analysis, it reeks of risk aversion. It just, it's about safety. And who can blame Ben Graham for putting safety first? But by 1986, the book was showing its age, right? It was a book where you wanted to buy a stock that behaved like a bond. That's basically what Ben Graham's security analysis. So the dividends came in for the coupons, you collected your cash flows, and you got some upside. Great, you get all the stuff that you get with the bond plus the upside. He said, don't do it. You say, what about the CFA? There was no CFA in 1986. So probably 3 people had taken it. Nobody. There were no valuation places you could go for the material. But I really, really wanted to teach this class. And I discovered very early in my experiences with universities that if you want to get anything done at a university, the best way to do it is to do it subversively. Because if you ask for official permission, you know what would happen, right? A committee will be formed. You guys have experience with committees being formed? They form, they meet, they keep meeting, they forget what they're meeting about, but they keep meeting anyway. And there are baby committees that they call subcommittees and subcommittees. And by the time they got back to me, it'd be 35 years later, and so you can teach the class. I'd be too old to do it. So I said, I'll teach your security analysis class. I walked in, closed the door. And remember, these were the days before there were cameras in the classroom. Forget about recording. That was not even on the realm of possibilities. And I taught a valuation class. They have no idea what I do inside the classroom. I could be teaching cooking for 15 weeks. And as long as everybody got an A, nobody was complaining. It was fall of 1986. This class, I'm teaching two variants of this class, one to the undergraduates, one to the MBAs, and I teach exactly the same class to both. See, but they're undergraduates. 21-year-olds with just as much brain power as MBAs do. There's nothing magical about valuation. It's exactly the same class. It's my 59th and 60th semester teaching this class. And I'm going to say something about this class that will encapsulate how I talk about valuation, think about valuation, write about valuation. Everything I know about valuation, I've learned in the course of teaching this class. Let me back that up. It was the fall of 1987, my 3rd semester teaching at NYU. And at that time, NYU's graduate business school was downtown, right next to the American Stock Exchange. That building is still there. It's been taken over by the New York public school system, I think. But at that time, it was a graduate business school. I always teach Monday, Wednesday. I'm a creature of habit. So I can name the date. It was October 19th of 1987. I taught my valuation class. It was from 9 to 10:30. And I come back to my office, I look out of my window, and I see that everybody from the exchange floor is out on the street. That's what happened. Maybe a fire alarm went off. Does anybody know what happened on October 19th of 1987 that drove those people onto the street? It was a Black Monday, but there have been a lot of Black Mondays. We have to get more specific. This was a particularly Black Monday. The S&P 500 on that day dropped by 22%. We're freaking out about the market drop today. We're talking about a 2% drop. Think about a drop 10 times larger and think of how much more you'd be freaking out. One day drop, 22%. Biggest single day drop in market history. It was Monday. Wednesday, I come back in front of my class. Guess what the first question I was asked was? How, with your valuation tools, can you explain the entire market dropping by 22%? I can't duck and weave, right? I mean, if you ask me, how can NVIDIA drop by 20% or 16%? I can duck and weave and tell you a story about it. But this is the entire market. How does that happen? I would be lying if I told you I had the answer, but I have this very bad habit that my kids point out to me, which is I can't say I don't know. I've got to figure it out. And I figure out in real time. So I said, I don't know, but let's think about what can cause the entire market to correct. The process that I started that day is a process I still go back to when markets go through crises. I went through it, 2020 with the COVID crisis. I went back to what I learned in 1987. But I didn't even think about that question until it happened in real time. And I was asked, how do you explain that? Fast forward to the 1990s, and you see something you'd never seen in public markets before. Companies with lots of potential, but with unformed business models going public. Those companies had always been around, but before the 1990s, where did they get their funding? Venture capitalists. For the first time, they skipped a step. They went directly to public markets. I'm talking, of course, about the dot-com boom. I remember the day in 1997. This class just like this one. By then, might have been in this room. I got shifted to Paulson right after. So, somebody, I don't know, third row, fourth row, puts up her hand. She says, can we value this company called Amazon.com? I said, I don't see why not. You know what kind of company Amazon was in 1997? It was an online book retailer. That's all they sold is books. Lots of potential, nothing to show for it yet. And we valued Amazon.com. And in fact, I kept a journal of every roadblock I ran into in valuing Amazon, because there was nothing in the literature, nothing in the practice about how to estimate revenues for a company with no financials, how to come up with risk for a company with no history, how to come up with comparables when the peer group all looks just like Amazon, all young companies with lots of potential. To show you how many roadblocks I ran into, by the time I was done, the journal was 74 pages long, and I never throw away anything I write. So I slapped a title on it, The Dark Side of Valuation, Can Amazon.com Be Valued? It's still on my website somewhere, because it's good to have your history staring you in the face, because you can't then run away and say, I never said that. Everything I know about valuing young companies, I learned in the process of valuing Amazon in 1997. So if you see my Zomato valuation from 2021, you'll see the residue of what I learned when I valued Amazon in 1997. Then you fast forward another 11 years, it's 2008, you're in a market crisis, but one caused by banks behaving badly. And again, early in 2009, somebody raises his hand, he says, why, when banks behave badly, do the rest of us feel the pain? He didn't use the word, but he was talking about systemic risk, the fact that when banks take on risks, it's not just banks that are affected, it's the entire economy. And again, I hadn't thought through this. Why, if I'm valuing Walmart, do I care about banks behaving badly? But in early 2000, there was no way around it. Every company you valued, this was a subtext. What will happen to banks? Will they get healthy again? But again, I hadn't thought about it until it came up. Then you get to the last decade. You get the decade of what I call the numbers company. What am I talking about? Let's take Facebook, or Meta as they prefer to call themselves now. What's the most impressive number about Meta? They don't have subscribers, remember. They have people on their platforms, right? How many people are on the Meta platforms? Remember, that includes WhatsApp. How many of you are on WhatsApp? Last time I was in India, I don't think you can function in India without WhatsApp now. It's become this vehicle. 3 billion people on Facebook, on Instagram, and WhatsApp. That's a mind-boggling number. 1 out of every 2 adults on the face of the earth is on the Facebook ecosystem. You know how much time they spend there? 57 minutes a day. You lay your claim on 1 hour of every walking human being's time, hey, you got the basis for an incredible value. The most impressive number about Netflix is not the number of bad shows they produce. That's rising up the ranks. I mean, no, you got to look through 10 shows before you can find a watchable show on Netflix. 7 different languages you're navigating through, and so I don't even know what that is. Most impressive number, though, is almost 300 people who are subscribers who pay $22.99 or $25 or $10 or $15 a month every month. So again, 2017, I value Netflix in my class the conventional way, project revenues, margins, cash flows, and somebody in the class raises their hand again and says, can you value a Netflix subscriber? Notice the question, not can you value Netflix, the company, can you value a Netflix subscriber? So Ashima, you're going to be my Netflix subscriber valuation. Let's take this to value Netflix subscriber. What's the first thing I need to estimate? That's the easy part, right? So are you a Netflix subscriber? How much do you pay per month? And so indirectly it goes through your cell phone, or when I ask this in my undergraduate class, everybody put their hands up for saying I'm a Netflix subscription, but they're all in the family subscription. I well know the feeling because I carry 5 family members on my subscription too. Actually 6. I'm not counting my wife. We're a team, but the other 4. On any given day, I can turn Netflix on and says, you can't watch it. I say, why not? Somebody's watching it already. Where? Then I have to start texting, get off Netflix now. I need to be on Netflix. But it's a subscription model. Pretty predictable, right? In terms of revenues, because the subscription it will change because Netflix obviously raises prices, you can bring that in. But before I do all of that, I have to make a judgment on how long a Netflix subscriber will stay a Netflix subscriber. You think that's a complete guess? Not really, right? What is the statistic you will find in these platform companies that you can use to estimate how long a subscriber stays a subscriber? It's called a churn rate. You know what a churn rate is? It's a percent. It essentially captures what percentage of your subscribers renew. You know what that number looks like for Netflix? It's 95%. A 95% renewal rate translates about a 12, maybe 13-year life. We can debate why it's so high. That's entirely part of their business model. Maybe the Stranger Things next season is enough to keep you on or something else, but you can see how these shows work in terms of keeping you on. So you have 12-year life. I estimate the subscription revenues every year. I'm almost there, but there are expenses that Netflix faces to service each subscriber. Not a whole lot. But you subtract out those costs, you come up with the profits I'm going to make per subscriber, which are very close to cash flows because nothing to depreciate, etc. And I come up with a present value. Of course, I've got to make judgments on how risky are these cash flows. And you could argue that existing subscriber revenues are pretty predictable, so I'm going to use a lower cost of capital. You can do a dance and get there, but ultimately, that's what I did in class. I ended up with about $500 per US Netflix subscriber. I'm not being parochial here. The reason I do that is how much you pay for Netflix varies depending on where in the world you're in. How many of you are India-based or are from India? Okay. If you look at a Netflix subscription in India, there's actually a version of Netflix you can get, I think, for $4 a month, but you can watch it only on your smartphone, which is fine because for some Indians, that's the only device that's connected to the internet or to cell service. You see why this matters, right? One of the things I find surprising when Netflix has an analyst meeting is when, the leading point always is, look at how many new subscribers we add. And I'm waiting for the question, I still haven't heard it asked, which is, if you're the analyst sitting in that room and Netflix says, we've added 8 million subscribers last year, what's a logical question you're going to ask them? Where in the world are these subscribers coming from? Why? Because the average Indian Netflix subscriber is worth about 1/5 the value of a US subscriber because they pay less in subscription revenues. There are more of them. That's a good side. So you can tell me the growth story, but I've got to bring in the fact that they're worth less. I would never have thought about those nuances if I hadn't tried to answer the question. And after I valued the Netflix subscriber, I said, this is neat. Why waste this architecture? Let's value a Spotify subscriber. That should be very similar, right? So I estimated the life of a Spotify subscriber, again, pretty high renewal rate. And then I got to the cost and I started thinking about business models. You know how the Netflix business model works, right? You make lots of content and then you seek out subscribers. You know how Spotify pays for content? Per stream. Okay. Do you have Spotify? Do you have Spotify? Do you have Spotify? Who's your favorite? So you can make up somebody if you're too embarrassed to admit who it is, right? You can say Taylor Swift. That usually kind of works. Right? Let's say you're a subscriber. You like Taylor Swift. My granddaughter loves Taylor Swift. That's all she listens to all day. I think she listens to the same song all day. You know, every time she listens to Taylor Swift gets paid for that stream. You know, 0.0, but think about number of streams, right? The fact that it's small, you know, you multiply 0.003 by 100 million, that's a lot of money. You know, Taylor Swift is not poverty stricken as a consequence. Right? But you see from a business model what this does, right? It means that there's a variable cost now with Spotify that did not have, which means a subscriber to Spotify is worth less, even if they charge the same subscription fee, than a subscriber to Netflix. It's a different business model. So if you're valuing Spotify and I see 40% margins, I'm going to push back. The reason being, right now, the cost of the music is about 83 to 84% of the revenues, and it's not budging as they scale up. But I wouldn't have thought about that until I started drinking. And since I was on this trip, I said, hey, I valued a Netflix subscriber, a Spotify subscriber. What's the value of an Amazon Prime member to Amazon? How many of you have Amazon Prime? Okay. So Sushmita, tell me how this works. You're on Amazon. How long have you been on Amazon Prime? I've been there since 2004. I was one of the originals. They don't give me a break because of it. And I'll wait. How many of you canceled your Amazon Prime? Oh, that's unusual, right? What led you to cancel it? Did you not like Jeff Bezos and Speedos? Yeah.
It's actually moving from India to US.
Okay, so it was a forced cancellation. My guess is they'll get you back as a different kind of Prime member. The reality is, once you get Prime, you're hooked. Right? Hooked on multiple levels. So first, if you're Amazon, you sign a Prime member, you got a long life subscriber to Prime. How do you make money off that subscription? You charge $139 a year. And I'll tell you, if that's all they did, this is a money-losing proposition for Amazon. Here's why. In return for the Prime, Franz, what do you get in return for paying for Prime?
Free shipment.
Free shipping. And last year, they actually are explicit about how much they spend on free shipping. It's tens of billions of dollars, including, you know, so you get free shipping. You also get free entertainment through Amazon Prime. You also get a 10% discount. I know all the insides of Amazon Prime. I live in that space. I get a 10% discount when I go to Whole Foods. And if I don't like what I get, I just take it to my local UPS. I don't even have to put it in a package. They have this nice code. They scan it. I'm money back. So they give away a lot of stuff, and it actually is well in excess of 139. So if I stopped right there, which is where I initially did, I said, this makes no sense. Why would they do it? You know why they get a benefit from Prime? You know, the typical Prime member spends 3 times more on Amazon than a non-Prime member. That incremental revenue and earnings, if you bring that in, makes an Amazon Prime member a value-adding proposition. You multiply it by 200 million Prime members. Amazon Prime alone is probably worth $200 billion to $300 billion, just the Prime. All of that from that initial question of, can we value a Netflix subscriber? And then we get to 2020. And I was teaching my valuation class down in Paulson. I convinced them this year, I don't like Paulson. Can we please do it in a different room? So I'm glad they moved me here. It was March 6th of 2020. I was teaching the class. And you know how we get this message that kind of is like a immediate message? Everybody's phones go off at the same time. We all get a message from the university at exactly the same time. You know what the message said, right? There's a virus floating around. We have no idea what it's called, the coronavirus. We have no idea what it does. But we know spring break is a week away, but we're going to let you go home. Let you is kind of a kind way of saying you have to go home now. But don't worry, we'll be back in 3 weeks. Complete lie, but we all went home. And the rest of that semester was taught from my upstairs office in my home in La Jolla. It was actually a lot of fun. Sun was out, so I could watch the ocean. But I was teaching the class on Zoom, and there was a problem. One is that everybody in this class, and I'll let you in, has to pick a company to value. In that class, people had to pick a company to value. And on March 6th, not only were we sent home, but the entire global economy came to a grinding halt. I still remember again, and this was in Zoom session, student says, You told us to pick a company, and I picked Boeing to value, and I am deeply troubled. You know why, right? March 21st of 2020, what is Boeing to sell aircraft, right? To whom? Airlines. Airlines are not even getting off the ground. So your business, so this is completely independent of other hash that Boeing has made with their business model. This is the entire shutdown. In addition, Boeing had borrowed money and it was heading towards a cliff. The news stories of Boeing would make it say, should I pick a different company? I said, no, let's see what we can do. So on March 23rd of 2020, I actually valued Boeing in class. The YouTube video is floating around somewhere, where I said, just because a company shut down doesn't mean you shouldn't, you can stop trying to estimate value because you still have to trade. Interesting exercise. How do you value a company when the global economy is shut down? You have no idea what's coming, immense amounts of uncertainty. But I learned interesting things about valuation in the face of macro uncertainty, economic shutdowns. So I think DeepSeek, I bought NVIDIA in 2018. I halved it 2 years ago. I halved it again. But I still have a quarter of it left, and I'll feel the pain this evening when I check out my final portfolio. But the plus is this is going to be a learning moment. This is going to be interesting from a valuation exercise to say, how does this play out? Where does it play out? Where does it end? Everything I know about valuation, I've learned in the course of teaching this class. So one of the things I'm going to try to do over the next 15 weeks is not tell you how to do things, because that's kind of useless, is to take you through the process of how you answer these questions that are going to come up in the next 15 weeks that we don't have an answer to right now. To give you a window into that process, because at the end, I want you to take that process away, where if you're asked a question to which you don't know the answer, you don't say, I don't know, or say, let's look it up online. You actually try to reason your way to an answer. So long lead in, let me talk a little bit about the logistics of the class. My office is right upstairs in this building. As you know, this is a very, very convoluted structure with 3 different buildings, Shimkin, Kaufman, and Tisch all gathered together. So you get on the wrong elevator, God help you. You will never get to the floor you want, which you probably found out already, but you're experienced enough with the elevator system at Stern that you're ready for an MBA. So you can find. I am also, I'm pretty good about responding to my emails. I get about 500 a day, so I've got to be careful to keep it in control, because I go 10 days without answering, I'm dead, I'm drowned. But I try to stay ahead of the game, at least for these 15 weeks. My homepage will come back and talk about much of what happens in this class you will use in your evaluation is on there. My office hours basically will be before class. But we also, in my corporate finance class, will remember the fair game principle. Do you remember what the fair game principle was? Michael, what is my fair game principle?
I remember.
If you find me on fair game, well, I'll give you 2 exceptions, but barring those 2 exceptions. 2 exceptions are the restroom, partly because it's unfair, right? Partly because 1/2 of you can find me there, or roughly a half. And the other is on, if I ever catch me at a gym or something, don't ask me, because my heart rate might be too high to give you a sensible response. But if you find me, the game starts right now, which means for the rest of the semester, what I'm going to try to do is make it difficult for you to find me. Like what I always take the stairs, because I know you guys never do, right? You take the elevator, so I'll try to avoid it. I'll walk the stairs. So if you want to find me, take the stairs. You'll catch me there. And you can ask me whatever question you want. I won't go far enough to say if you find me on a social media site, ask me, because I generally don't engage on Twitter or Facebook or anything. I post, but I don't engage. So if you have a question, find me. I'm fair game. Right? There are 2 TAs. Justin was just here at the start of the class. Guillermo, they both went through this class last year, so they're intimately aware of the tortures I will put you through. So take advantage of there. They will have review sessions every week starting next week. And the review sessions, basically, they will take problems from past quizzes and exams and work them through, because I won't do that in class. That's not the best use of my time. but they will work through it. So if you have mechanical trouble in terms of converting concepts to practice, well worth going to the review sessions. Okay. So here's what I'd like to start with today. I want to lay out some very broad themes about valuation. And while I won't talk about a single number, no betas, cost of capital, cash flow, to me, the next 20 minutes might be the 20 minutes that you remember the most and matter the most in your class. Here are the broad themes. First, if you ask me to characterize valuation as a discipline, and reminder a question I get asked all the time. Is valuation a science or an art? Don't jump in too soon, right? Let's dig a little deeper, right? Meenakshi, is valuation a science? Okay, that's tough to answer. Is mathematics a science? It's the only pure science. In fact, mathematicians are convinced that the rest of us are imposters. So let's dig it a little deeper. Dagmara, what is it about mathematics that makes it a science? I can plug all kinds of numbers into valuation and come up with another number. It's more than that, right? You plug some numbers and you get an answer. It's absolute, right? I don't want to insult you, but what's 2 plus 3? 5, right? Left hand, right hand, calculator, computer, AI, ChatGPT, North Pole, South Pole. Doesn't matter where you are. It's not maybe 5, could be 5. It is 5. And if I give you any other answer, I screwed up. Science, you get the inputs right, you get the output right. Conversely, you get the output wrong, you did something wrong. So mathematics is clearly a science. Physics is mostly a science, right? We all found a way to get to the 9th floor, which we can, get the windows open, which I don't think we can, but let's say we could. And we all jumped out. We don't fall in the order of our IQs or where we are in the corporate hierarchy or how much we know about valuation. The laws of gravity are the laws of gravity. Physics is mostly a science. There are portions of physics we say they're making up crap. Now, every discipline does that. It's mostly a science. But the essence of a science, you get the inputs right, you're going to get the output right. Is there any chance that valuation can be a science? Absolutely no chance. And I'm going to value NVIDIA again this week. This is the right time to do it when everybody's running for the exit doors and everybody's terrified, uncertainty is greatest. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to take everything I know about valuation, which is not everything that it can be known, but I know I've accumulated a fair amount of knowledge, take every piece of data I can find on AI chips, DeepSeek, and I'm going to try to come up with the value of NVIDIA. Let's say I come up with that value. What percentage of the time am I going to be right? In the sense that numbers that I use are actually going to get delivered. 0% of the time. Why? Because life gets in the way, right? I'm forecasting the future. There are lots of things I don't anticipate that will happen that were unanticipatable at the start, if that's even a word that can be used. I'm going to be wrong 100% of the time. Before you start digging philosophy, why is that? There's a simple reason for that. I'm not God. If you're operating under the delusion, you have far deeper problems than I can solve in this. But you are forecasting the future, you're going to be wrong 100% of the time. Valuation is not a science, it'll never be a science, and the sooner we come to that acceptance, the healthier the discussion of valuation will become. I have some terrible things to say about accounting, and especially about fair value accounting. And the reason is, accountants actually operate under this misconception that valuation is a science, and they think if they write more rules, it'll become more scientific, that everybody does the same stupid thing, and you can force them all, that the process has become scientific. That's a very strange definition of science. It's not a science. So it must be an art, right? So let's take that apart. I think on the 3rd or 4th floor of this building, you come off the elevator, there's a Picasso hanging on the wall. Don't get too excited. It's a, picture of a Picasso, not a Picasso. Which reminded me of when I took my oldest son, who's now 35, when he was 8 years old, I took him to the Met for a Picasso exhibit. You know how long 8-year-olds last in museums? Not very long. with immense amounts of bribery. I said, I'll take you to the baseball card store. You can get the ice cream of your choice. He finally relented. We went in. He lasted about 30 minutes. He come out and said, Ryan, what do you think of that? He said, Dad, I was not impressed. I said, what? There's a Picasso exhibit. He said, this guy can't get the nose in the right place. If you notice about Picasso's nose comes out the side of the head, the top of the head, the back of the head. It's almost like he was either drugged or drunk, which given Picasso's history is probably both. But for whatever reason, we've gathered together and Picasso's a special, $200 million. Thank God my son is not the appraiser, because then he'd be giving Picasso's away. This guy can't get the nose in the right place. The essence of an art is you really cannot teach it. Saying, but I can go to Juilliard, or I can go to, you're right, you can teach them the mechanics, or I can teach you to paint like an impressionist, but you can do everything that Picasso did, but you won't be Picasso because there's this magical component that makes you great. I hope valuation is not an art, or I wasted 40 years of my life trying to teach something that cannot be taught. It's not a science. It's not an art. What the heck is it? The word I used to describe valuation is it's a craft. I'll give you the discipline that I think is closest to valuation. It's cooking. Think of how you master cooking. I'll give you one strategy. You can watch the Food Network 16 hours a day, every day. My daughter used to do this when she was younger. Well, now she could tell you in theory how to make a souffle. She couldn't cook a lick. You don't learn cooking by watching the Food Network. You don't learn cooking by watching Beat Bobby Flay. You don't learn cooking by reading cookbooks. You learn cooking by cooking. You got to go to that room in your apartment that you call the kitchen. I know you've been avoiding it like the plague because you've got DoorDash. Why would you ever need to go to that room? And when you first start cooking, what happens? Fire alarms go off. Disaster strikes. I still remember the first time I scrambled eggs. Nobody told me I was supposed to spray the damn pan. I scrambled the eggs. They look really good, but they're stuck to the pan. Pan and eggs go into the trash. But I learned a very important lesson about scrambling eggs. First, spray the pan. You learn cooking by cooking. You learn valuation by doing. Which means the 26 sessions you're going to spend in this classroom are kind of wasted, right? You're going to watch me talk about valuation. But to learn valuation, you got to do it. So I'm going to drag you across that finish line, partly by force. Your project will be to pick a company and value it and it's a real company, no XYZ widget company, no case studies. That's ridiculous to have case studies in a valuation class when you got 40,000 live case studies out there. Pick one of them. Value the company. And if you really, really want to master valuation, I'm going to give you a second shot. Every week, I'm going to put up what I call a valuation of the week. So tomorrow will be the first valuation of the week. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to value the S&P 500. Let's start big, right? Because the big question is the market overvalued? So I'm going to give you my valuation with my story for the S&P 500. I emphasize the word my. And I'll back it up. There's a blog post that goes with an Excel spreadsheet. I will do the dirty work of building the spreadsheet. And all you have to do is take that valuation and look at places where you disagree with me. I'll do the work of converting that into a value. There'll be a Google shared spreadsheet where I'll have in the first line my value, my estimates. And I want you to go into that Google shared spreadsheet and it'll take you all of 5 minutes to do. This is not deep. You're not building a spreadsheet from scratch. I'll tell you up front what you're going to say. You're going to say, look, we just started the class. I've never valued an index or even a company. So I understand. First week, you know what you're going to do? You're going to take every number in that spreadsheet, leave it as is, take the risk-free rate, add a third decimal to it, and your value is going to be very close to mine. The first week, we're all going to come in values right on top of mine because, the way I know this class is working is next week, I'm going to put up maybe it'll be NVIDIA and DeepSeek. The week after that, maybe Vinamilk, which is a Vietnamese dairy company. You say, are you going to Vietnam and picking a dairy company? If all you cook is pasta, day in, day out, you're going to get really good at cooking pasta, right? But then I say, can you make some bibimbap for me? You're going to say, what the heck is a bibimbap? I can't do that. If you really want to understand valuation, you got to try different kinds of companies. So over the next 14 weeks, there's going to be a valuation of the week each week. It's completely optional. You're going to do fine in this class without ever doing a valuation of the week, but there's a difference between doing well in this class and really learning valuation. It's too much to ask of yourself to do all 14. So pick your battles, pick the companies you find interesting. Maybe NVIDIA is the company you want to take. Do at least 3 or 4 of them because this is the process, and don't stop after this class is done. Keep adding companies. Every time you value a company, you will learn something new about valuation. And the essence of a craft is you never, ever master it. There's always some aspect that's Gordon Ramsay might be a master chef, but there are cuisines he's not very good at, right? Which effectively means you can never shut the door and say, look, I've mastered the craft. Leave the door ajar. There are things that you can continue to learn about the craft. Second, you're going to get sick and tired of a pushback you're going to hear from me. And here's what the pushback will look like. You'll say, so-and-so valued the company, or can you value this company? And my first question to you is, do you want me to value this company or price it? Sounds like I'm playing with words, right? But in this class, we're going to draw a distinction in valuing something and pricing that same thing. And here's the distinction. We know what drives value. It's cash flows, growth, and risk. And you can build a discounted cash flow model if you need to bring them all in. So when you do discounted cash flow valuation, you actually mean what you say when you say, I want to do it. You are trying to value something. You're saying, what about price? It comes from demand and supply, right? What drives demand and supply? It's true, cash flows, growth, and risk might affect it, but so do mood and momentum and even revenge. Saying revenge? Heard the GameStop story? Some of you might be old enough to remember what GameStop used to be, right? It used to be a staple at every mall. And there was a time when if you're a teenager, this is the store you went to because you played with the different games, and once in a while you had enough money to actually buy a game. But those days are done. I don't remember the last time I was actually in a physical mall. GameStop has faded as a business, and by 2020, 2021, I think the price was down to like $12 per share. It was heading towards the exit door. When something magical happened, a group of people got together on Reddit. We can't keep social media. This is part of investing in markets called Wall Street Bets. That was the Reddit group. And they decided that they were going to push up the price of GameStop. So I actually made the mistake of going on that Reddit group to see what rationale they could give for why a fading business model like GameStop would come back. And I read through like 1,000 comments. Not one of them talked about business models or why. You know what the overriding reason they were pushing the price up was? What were they trying to accomplish? Take revenge on the hedge funds. And that's an entirely different debate we can have, is why they're so pissed off at hedge funds. But clearly they were. And the way they were going to take revenge is they took the $12 and they bid the stock price up to $400 per share. You're a small, lightly traded stock. If enough people gather together, it can happen. Revenge. You see, that doesn't make sense. Come on, what's a more authentic human emotion? Revenge or working through a DCF spreadsheet? You hate your neighbor. You're not working through a DCF spreadsheet. You think about keying his car or breaking into his garage or doing something that you kind of restrain yourself from doing. Revenge is part of humanity. Mood and momentum. You see, what mood? What is the mood around AI until Friday? AI is amazing. It'd be amazing how quickly the mood can shift in the entire opposite direction, right? Mood and momentum. Here's the difference between valuing something and pricing something. You ask me to value something, I've got to understand the business model, estimate cash flows, growth, and risk, and bring it into value. You ask me to price something, I'm going to look for other things like it out there and look at what people are paying for those other things and say, this is what I would pay for yours. A very different process. The next time you see an equity research analyst say they valued a company using price earnings ratios and 20 other companies, a peer group, before they get deeper, say, look, you haven't valued the company, you priced it. There's nothing, I'm not making a judgment that this is good or bad, it's just different. Most of you, if you end up in this process, will have pricing jobs. You go to work for a bank, I don't even know why banks waste their time on discounted cash flow models. They're in the pricing game. They got to get deals done. The reality is many of you are taking this class because you think you will have valuation jobs, but you'll have pricing jobs. So it's my responsibility to talk about how to price things better because we don't do a very good job pricing things. SeatGeek does a better job of pricing Yankee tickets than an equity research analyst does in pricing Microsoft. We'll talk about what it is we're missing in the pricing process, but this is something we're going to come back to over and over again. Today, Microsoft's value didn't drop by 800 billion. Its price dropped by 800 billion. Why am I valuing Amazon? I'm sorry, Nvidia's value didn't drop by 800. Value didn't drop by 800. Its price dropped by 800 billion. The reason I'm valuing Nvidia is what's the question I'm trying to answer? Is did the value also drop? We agree that today Nvidia is a less valuable company than on Friday because we don't need those high chips, at least for some aspects of AI. The question is, how much did the value drop? If it dropped by only 600 billion, the price dropped by 800 billion, we're in business here. We can talk about buying Nvidia. You're asking a different question, framing it differently, but that comes from asking different questions. Now, if I asked you what your priors were about what we'd value, most people say you value companies like Nvidia and Apple. But the truth is, this is a class about valuing just about anything. True, we're going to value publicly traded companies across the life cycle. We're going to value everything from Palantir, which is, I don't even know what it does. It says mysterious things to the CIA and the FBI. And I'm afraid to ask, Danny, are you from, one of you from Palantir? So don't ask him too many questions. You might end up in Guantanamo Bay. Okay? But it's a young company with lots of potential and clearly some competitive advantages, all the way to Kraft Heinz or Coca-Cola or worse, right? Across the life cycle, young to old. If all I'm valuing is mature companies, this class would be a waste of time because a machine could do it. We're also going to value private businesses. Let's face it, for every public company that needs a valuation, there are lots and lots of private businesses, and the way private companies are valued is really an art form. The kinds of corners that get cut. We're going to talk about how we can think about valuing private companies and not cut corners and come up with it. We're going to also talk about valuing individual assets. I'm a Yankee fan, and I'm deadly curious, is Juan Soto really worth 765 million? I'm taking off 20 million there to the New York Mets. We can value an additional player, right? In fact, in some cases, a person can make a difference. I think Shohei Ohtani has made the Dodgers a more valuable team, not because they won the World Series. That fifth inning in the fifth game will stay in my mind forever as a Yankee fan, but I don't want to revisit that bad memory. In what way did Ohtani increase the value of the Dodgers? First, how much did the Dodgers pay Ohtani on his contract? Give me the easy answer. 700 million. See, but it really is only about 450 million. Why? It's the most absurdly structured contract I've ever seen. It's 20 million over the next 10 years. See, that's not a lot of money. 2 million a year, I can live on that. Plus 680 million at the end, right? So if you think about value, you think in present 450 million. What does it bring to the Yankees? What drives the value of a sports franchise? Tickets used to be the key driver. Those days are done. About 15% of value comes from merchandise is another 10%, but you're missing the big 75%. It's media contracts. You're saying, why would signing Ohtani affect that? You've now got an entire country as your extension for your market. I'll wager when the Dodgers are playing, there are a lot more Japanese watching that game than people in LA. Lionel Messi increased the value of every Major League Soccer team by about 15% when he signed for with Miami a couple of years ago. Why? Because He drew in people who would never watch soccer, at least the soccer played in the US, because Messi was on the field. Because he drew people into stadiums. Apple TV, which had the sole rights to MLS, saw its subscriber numbers jump. So can we value what Juan Soto brings to the Mets? Yes. But I don't think it had anything to do with value. Why did the Mets pay Soto $765 million? Think pricing. Because the Dodgers, on the face of it, paid $700 million. This is how the pricing game works, right? If you're Scott Boras, you go, hey, they paid $700 million. You got to pay that. Nobody talks in present value terms in this process. Maybe we should, but they paid I wager if Soto had come up without the Otani contract, you'd be talking $500 million. It's a pricing game. So we're going to talk about pricing and valuing. We might even ask, is Bitcoin under or overpriced? You can't ask it's under or overvalued. Why not? It has no cash flows. It's not a cash. If it's a currency, you can ask, is it a good currency? If it's a collectible, So everything is fair game in this class, right? So if you have something unique you think you want to see valued or priced, we'll talk about at least the process to do it. We'll also talk about looking at value from different perspectives. Like what? We're going to first value companies as investors. But as investors, you have little control over how companies are run. You essentially have to take them as given, right? So you might not like the way Mark Zuckerberg runs Facebook. What the heck are you going to do about it? He controls 57% of the voting rights. We're also going to value companies from the inside out. What does that mean? If you're a family-controlled business, how do I increase the value of the business? Or if you're a consultant telling a company, you now have the levers under your control. You can change the way the companies run. So we're going to look at companies from different perspectives. Same principles apply, but the levers start to become more movable in some other than. We're also going to bring in a little bit of option pricing we'll talk about, where not to value options. There's an entire class for that, but to value things in businesses that have optionality. I'll set the table. You're valuing an oil company. Its reserves are it's extensive reserve, but they're very expensive to get out of the ground. In fact, they're so expensive that right now the cost of getting the oil out of the ground exceeds the price. Remember briefly in 2020, the oil price dropped to like $30 a barrel. 2/3 of the oil companies in the world, their oil reserves were not viable. So if I came to with an oil company in the middle of 2020 and said, how much should you pay for it? From an intrinsic value standpoint, you might have looked at the value price of oil and said, why would I pay for it? Why would I pay for it though? There's an optionality. What's the optionality? Oil price at $30, but we know the history of oil prices. They can go up, they can go down, and they go up. These reserves could become viable. It's a different way of looking at companies, and we'll talk about how these are called real options. We talked about the Facebook platform, 3 billion people on it, right? Right now, how does Facebook make money? Almost entirely advertising. But you got 3 billion people an hour every day. Could there be other stuff you could do with them? I'm not going to fall into the metaverse hole because that you could never get out of it. But there are other things they could conceivably do, right? Which right now I don't have in my valuation because they don't even know whether it's economic, but to the extent that they can, there's an optionality there. So we're going to look at almost every aspect of it, which brings me to my fourth theme. And this is something that I had to learn myself as I taught this class. About 5 years into teaching this class, I had an existential crisis. So why am I put on the face of the earth? What am I doing? I mean, that's too deep. That's not how far I went. But I said, why am I teaching this class? The reason I was in crisis is because I could value mechanically just about anything, but I had no faith. Strange word to use, right? Faith to do what? To act on my valuations. Because I knew how easily I could move the numbers around. And I said, what am I missing? And I realized what I was missing is value doesn't come from a spreadsheet, it comes from a business model. I didn't flesh out the story that drove my numbers. And to be honest, it didn't come easily to me, storytelling. But I had to teach myself enough storytelling to be able to have faith in my valuations. That started in the 1990s. In fact, in 2017, it became a book because I was terrified of what was happening to valuation in practice. Those of you who worked in valuation, it's really become financial modeling, right? I mean, you take the training, the street, I have nothing bad to say about these people because they do provide a service. They're Excel ninjas. They say, if you hit these buttons together, every alternate row becomes a different color. Amazing. That will give me a much better value for the company, right? But essentially, that's what it's become, financial modeling. And along the way, we've completely lost our way on valuation. A good valuation can never be numbers in a spreadsheet. A good valuation is a bridge between stories and numbers. What does that mean? When you show me the valuation of a company, and you look at my numbers, let's say you see revenues of 50 billion in year 10, say, why are your revenues 50 billion in year 10? Here's the answer you don't want to hear. It's because I used a 25% growth rate for the next 5 years and 8% thereafter. What the heck do you do with that? What I have to tell you is my story for the company that will allow it to deliver 50 billion in revenues. Every number in your valuation has to have a story that goes with it. And every story you tell me about a company has to have a number attached to it. Like what? You tell me a company is a great brand name. I don't even know what that means. How does it translate? Where does it show up? You have a great management team. You have a loyal employee force. Where does it show up? Every story you tell about your company has to have a number attached to it. And one of my challenges to you over the next 15 weeks is there's lots of fuzzy stuff, what they call soft stuff, and people kind of leave it to the side. I want you to think about every soft thing you hear about in every other class. Say, how would I convert? You'd make your pain in the neck in those classes, but that's not my problem. So people use a word like sustainability. What exactly does that mean? What are you sustaining? Why do people care? Where does it show up? It's, I think, good for both the sustainability people and you to ask those questions, right? Because we've let them get away with a lot of bullshit for a while. And it's time to start pushing back. You want to talk about sustainability? I'm willing to talk. You want to talk about ESG? I have terrible things to say, but I'll push back. Everything you bring to the table, my job is to say what's behind it. You think that's so mercenary. You're valuing a business. Of course it's going to be mercenary. It has to show up in the numbers, right? You can't take customer loyalty and pay dividends with customer loyalty. The customer loyalty has to show up somewhere. Repeat purchases, higher margins. Because I had to teach myself storytelling and connecting, I go through a process, a linear process. You know why a linear process? Because I'm a natural number cruncher. I need steps. If you're a natural storyteller, and that's the question I'm going to come back and ask you to think about, what comes more easily to you, storytelling or number crunching? If you're a natural storyteller, you might not like sequences. It throws you off. Come up with your own. So we'll go through the process by which I connect stories to numbers, not because my sequence is right for you, but I want you to think about the sequence you're going to use to bring both halves of your brain to play in evaluation. And finally, let's build on this word faith. I don't do consulting. I never appraised a company for money. And I'm not doing this and saying this, I just am too lazy and too opinionated to do it. So when I value companies, I have an audience of one, which is myself. The only person I have to keep happy is me. And luckily, I like what I do, so I keep myself pretty happy. But I don't value companies because I'm intellectually curious. I don't lie awake at nights and wonder what's going to happen, what the value of NVIDIA is right now. Maybe you do, but I think you have a serious mental illness if that's what you do. I value companies because I want to act on those valuations. And it's a lot more difficult than it sounds, right? Think through what has to happen for you to act on a valuation. First, you have to value the company, right? Did you have to make a lot of assumptions to get there? Absolutely. Do you have enough faith in the valuation when you first value a company? Probably not, right? Because you say, I don't know, I just made up stuff. I came out of that book or that lecture. No, but that's the process. At some point, maybe you'll acquire enough faith. You value a company, you have enough faith. Doesn't mean you're certain about the number, but I think it's going to be somewhere around there. But there's another thing you need to have faith in to actually make money, right? Which is, let's say you value a company at 100 and you feel pretty comfortable. If stock is trading at 60, what has to happen for you to make money? 60 has to go to 100. The price has to correct to value. And you have to have faith that we're all believers in efficient markets. The only thing is when it happens, right? So don't beat up efficient markets too badly, because markets are truly random. We're completely lost. We have to have faith in our value and faith that the price will correct. You're saying, how do I get that faith? I don't know. All I can do is tell you where my faith comes from. And I'll be honest, because when you have faith, that faith is going to be tested. What does that mean? If I think a company is undervalued and I buy the stock, you know how my faith gets tested? The next day the stock drops another 10%. That's like market knocking on your door saying, do you still have faith? How about right now? And let's face it, at some point I give up. And when that happens, I often write about it in my blog saying, I give up. In fact, when I sold Vale in 2014, the Brazilian mining company, the title of this, the title I gave my post was No Mas, No Mas, which comes from an old boxing match for Roberto Duran, you know. And the big response from Brazil was, we speak Portuguese, not Spanish, but they missed the message, which is, I give up, you know. So the essence of faith is it will get tested and sometimes it will break, and there's no shame in that. You know why I don't like to go to Omaha, Nebraska around April or May of each year? Because you have what I call investing Woodstock that happens there, which is people who are true believers show up in Omaha, value investors, and they pay homage to what used to be two 90-plus-year-olds. Now it's going to be only one. But there's the sense of absolutism there, which is we're the chosen ones, we do the right things, cuts against every grain of how I think about valuation. I still remember a talk that Mother Teresa once gave. This was in the 70s. I was lucky enough to. And she started her talk by saying, every morning I wake up and I question the existence of God. If Mother Teresa can get up every morning and question the existence of God, I can get up every morning and say, did I get the NVIDIA value right? This is a much lower level question, right? So when people say, I'm absolutely sure about value, I say, where does that certainty come from? So remember those themes, because those are going to underlie this class. So the structure of the class you can see is, we're going to spend about maybe 8 sessions getting the basics nailed down. And you're going to get impatient because we're not going to value a single company. If you don't know what free cash flow to the firm is, or you don't know how to bring risk, we can't get to valuing companies. So we're going to spend some time and in the process, if you've taken corporate finance, you're going to see me revisiting things like free cash flow to equity. You remember free cash flow to equity? Vaguely, right? And that's the problem, is it's vague. So I'm going to revisit it and I'm going to build on it. So, and then we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to value companies, and as many different companies as we can. Once we value companies, we're going to turn to pricing. We're going to spend a few sessions on how to do pricing right. What's missing in pricing right now? What can we do better? It's almost all built around statistics, using more data, using it more sensibly. Once we get through the pricing, we'll spend a session on valuing private business. Using just a session, if you can value a public company, I'm going to argue that you already have the levers in place. I have to tell you which levers to move differently to value private businesses. Then we're going to turn to options. And I'll start by spending about 30 minutes with basic option pricing, because I will not make the mistake of assuming that you actually are familiar with the Black-Scholes model. You might be familiar in a very loose sense of the word. You saw it, but it's past your mind already. So I'll spend about 30 minutes kind of giving you a very quick, because I need the option pricing model to be able to value startups and young pharma companies. So I'm going to value real options. Then in sessions 24 and 25, I'm going to circle back to first valuing acquisitions. What's separate, different about valuing a target company and acquisition? 2 words that come up: control and synergy. We're going to talk about, hey, what do they mean? How do we put a number on it? And then I want to talk a little bit about value enhancement. How do you change the value of a company? Why? Because that might be your job. You own a business, you want to increase its value, not just estimate its value. You're a consultant working with a company. Again, your job is to increase value. So we're going to talk about those levers. The last session, which I call the grand finale, we're going to take all of this, and then I'm going to use your valuations. For the moment, I'll leave it at that, of the companies you picked as my vehicle to talk about, hey, why do we get what we get? What do we find? What can we draw from this? It's too late for preseason prep, but I sent you this email 2 weeks ago, but if your accounting is weak, your statistics is shaky, you're still wrestling with that present value button on your calculator, your computer, it's time to get ahead of the game, right? So if you find yourself, wondering what's the difference between gross income and operating income, and if I've already set loose the dogs of war in your head, that's a good signal that maybe you need to revisit your accounting. If you're saying, well, when should we use averages and when should we use medians? That's not a finance question, it's a statistics question. So I've created these short classes, which would make a purist in any of those disciplines blanch, because I break every rule in the book, because this is accounting, statistics, and foundations as I see it as necessary for the class. Take advantage of that. I will torture you. Starting today, you've already got 3 emails in case you haven't checked, right? Starting today, you will get an email every day until May 5th. Those of you in my corporate finance class know this process. Except for the spring break, I will give you 7 days off. Very biblical. I will let you kind of have the sabbatical from my emails, but every day. What will those emails contain? After class today, I'll send you an email about this is what we did in class today. Saying, I was in class already. Why is he sending me the email? Because you were physically in class, but maybe mentally you took a walk in the park or wherever else you went. Right? So just a reminder with this. Tomorrow, you'll set the valuation of the week. So tomorrow I'll send you my S&P 500 valuation. I'll give you the Google shared spreadsheet and then say, go to town on it. Incidentally, I'm going to open this up to both the undergraduate and the MBA class and to the rest of the world. So don't be surprised to see the numbers mount up because other people are coming in, putting their perspectives. On Wednesday, after the class, in addition to sending you a regular email covering the class, I'll give you what's called a weekly challenge. You're saying, what's the weekly challenge? We'll take whatever we did in that week, Monday and Wednesday. And in the weekly challenge, I will test to see if you can take it to the next level. Not just the mechanical, but did you get the concept right? Completely optional. I mean, people have described this class as trying to drink out of a water hose because there's so much stuff coming at you. Pick and choose your battle. So if you can do a weekly challenge, try it out. It actually kind of, but if you have to miss it, not the end of the world. Thursday, I'll send you an update about the project, this project I keep talking about. The purpose of this update is singular. It's to make you feel guilty. And here's why. The valuations are not due till May 5th. There's an intermediate step I'll talk about where you can turn it in for feedback, but the actual, which means you're going to be tempted to keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And all this email will do is, this is where you're supposed to be on this project. Then you can fill in the rest. This is where I am. This is a big difference. I need to move quickly. It almost never works on everybody. So there'll be people who are still picking companies in week 14. Nothing I can do about that. But the project email will basically say, this is where you should be. On Friday, I will do a webcast basically on some practical aspect of valuation. How do you come up with a peer group? So I'll go through Capital IQ, download companies, and this is the process. Again, because it's a practical thing. You run into an valuation the first time you do it, and you're saying, do I do it by SIC codes, NIC? So this is about the practical steps in valuation. So webcast will cover it. On Saturday, there'll be a newsletter. What will cover? The news for the week, which is not much news. But essentially, think of it as a GPS. Now, it's a class of reasonable size, not as big as my corporate finance class. My undergraduate class is 350. That class, people are going to get lost. They'll have no idea where they are in the class. This will just tell you, this is the page in the lecture notes we're in. This is where we're going to be next week. So it's not going to be news in the newsy sense, but basically keeping you grounded in where the class is at that point in time. On Sunday, I'll send you the solution to the weekly challenge from Wednesday. It's completely optional. So if you didn't do the weekly challenge, there's probably no point looking at the solution, or maybe that's what you do, is you look at the challenge, you don't do it, you look at the solution, and you treat it as another problem that got done. Now, but I'll leave that to you, given how much time you might be able to spend in the class. In terms of class material, it's going to be almost entirely through the lecture notes. 3 packets. You got the first packet. All 3 packets are updated. Collectively, I think there are almost 700 plus slides. But download the packets. You don't have to print them because you can do them. You can keep them on your iPad. You can keep them on. They're available both in PowerPoint and PDF. The nice thing about the PowerPoint is they come with the notes page, but the not so nice thing about PowerPoint is first, its files are much bulkier. And for whatever reason, Microsoft PC PowerPoint doesn't behave well with Microsoft Mac PowerPoint. It doesn't always convert. So when you download the PowerPoint, it might give you terrifying messages like your file is damaged, you want to repair it, just repair it. Seems to do okay. I had to run through it when I downloaded onto this because I have a Mac and this is a PC. It'll also tell you it has links to outside files that might be dangerous. Trust me, I haven't hidden any things in there to track you for the rest of your life. So if you're willing to get past those scary looking messages, you can do the PowerPoint. The PDF files are much cleaner. You don't have the font problems you have, so you can download the PDF files. They're smaller, they're more compact, easier to work with. Class rules, try to be in class. I will make it easy for you not to be in class because I'm always looking for ways to disrupt myself. What does that mean? Every class is going to be Zoomed. Right now, the Zoom link. And it will be recorded. And so can you take this class by never coming physically to class? Yeah. In this case, the question I'm asking is why are you paying $250 per session? Because I'm giving that chance to everybody outside in the rest of the world. They're going to be able to watch the recording. So you're paying this money, might as well get some value for the money. So I'm not going to take attendance. I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't show up in class, but I'd really, really like to see you in class. Okay. So if you miss a class, no excuses. The class recording is there. You can catch up. You can be in another part of the world. You can be in an interview. I understand you might not be able to make the class at the time it starts, but don't fall behind 3 or 4 sessions because the hill you're climbing will get steeper and steeper the more you let yourself get behind. Do you need a book? Absolutely not. In fact, if I were taking this class, I wouldn't buy my own book. Why? Because it's obscenely overpriced. The book that's most closely connected to this class is Investment Valuation. The 4th edition just came out. Wiley reached out to me and said, we can send you copies of the 1st edition at 50% discount. I said, how much is it after the 50% discount? They said $58. And I said, not interested. It's like $100+. Is it good to have? If that's the way you want to keep up with the class, it is a nice thing to have. But if you have the 3rd edition, fine. If you found a version that was pirated outside a train station in India, that's okay too. Whatever rings your bell, I'm okay with it. But if you don't want to, so I have 5 books basically, and if you go in, it'll tell you what the differences are. The little book obviously is just little. So it takes the 1,000+ pages. Investment Valuation does it in 230 pages. The dark side is about valuing difficult to value companies. If you got the core stuff all nailed down, you can get it from the lecture notes. The dark side can supplement it. Narrative and numbers is about connecting stories to numbers. And the modern evaluation is my most ego-driven choice of title. It's actually the very first book I wrote. And my publisher said, why don't you put your name on it? I said, nobody knows me. And they said, can I put O.J. Simpson on valuation? This is when the trial was going on, would sell more books. He said, no, you have to put your name. But that's a book that's for practitioners. It's about things like liquidity discounts and control premiums. So pick your poison, but if you don't want to buy any of the books, you're perfectly okay with just the lecture notes. Now, in terms of if you have an Apple device, how many of you have Apple devices? Okay, I do too. You go to the App Store and you type in UValue. There's an app that you can download for your iPhone or your iPad, which will basically a valuation app. Comes with a money back guarantee. You know why? It's free. You don't like it? Tough. You can have your money back. It's worth nothing. It was built with my friend Anand Sudram, who teaches Dartmouth, for one reason and one reason alone, to show that much of what you get as valuations from investment banks and appraisers is mechanical. So this is an app, you put in 12 numbers in your company, it'll turn out an intrinsic valuation that I'll put up against any banking intrinsic valuation of a company. It is essentially a reminder that, disruption is waiting around the corner. You're an Excel ninja. How long do you think I need you? Right? You're doing mechanical stuff. The machine is always going to be better. If you get a chance, you might want to read this post I had called Beat Your Bot. About every one of you has a bot looking over your shoulder. And that bot got more powerful today than Friday. You know why? Because it can be turned loose at a lot less money. And your job will be to figure out what you can do that your bot can't do. So is the final links, the web page for the class. This is going to be the platform where you can find pretty much everything for the class, not Brightspace. So come here. There will be stuff you can go find in Brightspace, but it'll be peripheral stuff. This is going to be the place where all the material is. The YouTube channels where all the lectures will go on as a playlist for the class. Every email I send you, I know what's going to happen. You're going to probably block me after the second week because I'm just inundating your email box. And you're going to claim you never got that email that I sent on February 5th of 2025. It's not going to work because every email I send will go to the Chronicles. And there will be February 5th. So you can't say, look, I don't care if you didn't get it. It's in there. You can check it. So this is basically my way of making sure that you are connected to me in terms of getting stuff done for the class. There's a Google Calendar for the class, which tells you when the quizzes are. There are 3 quizzes in a final exam. The 3 quizzes are 10% apiece. The final exam is 30%. I know life gets in the way that you might have to miss a quiz. And if you miss a quiz, the score will always be moved to the remaining quizzes. So you don't lose the 10%, but only to the remaining quizzes. Can't be moved back. I've been teaching 40 years. I've seen the gaming that can go on here because I don't want strategic quiz missing. You know what that means? You do very well in the first 2 quizzes. You're going to be tempted to miss the 3rd quiz because then it makes your first 2 quizzes have higher weights. In this class, that doesn't happen. It just goes to the final exam. Okay? But if you miss a quiz, it's not the end of the world. Do it for good reasons. What are good reasons? I think I've listed the good reasons here. So go down the reasons, right? But the honest truth is, if you want to lie to me, I'm not going to. So if you say I'm sick, I'm not going to send a doctor to your apartment to see if you're really sick or ask for a doctor's note. I'll assume that you're telling me the truth. So you really want to miss a quiz, you can find a good reason. At least do me the service of coming up with a good reason, even if it's a lie. Don't say the one reason I don't feel ready. Even if that's a reason, make up another one, right? So my pet died is good reason, or even if you don't have a pet, I have no way of checking. So in terms of other stuff, there's my blog in which I dabble. So I've sent you the first 3 data updates for the year, and sometime in the next week, I plan to write a piece on how the world changed over the weekend. What does it mean for companies in the AI ecosystem? I have a Twitter feed, but it's just for me to tell you something is happening. I don't engage on Twitter. So don't start a debate with me in Twitter because it'll be a one-sided debate. I will let you talk yourself into a hole. And the reason I don't debate on Twitter is nothing good ever happens when you debate on Twitter. You end up with the least common multiple driving the process, and I have no desire to go there. And if you still find yourself with time in your hands, there are more readings, mostly from Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Forbes, etc. Here's the unpleasant stuff. I know I could tell you grades don't matter, but we know that's a lie. So this is the process. Every finance class is covered by this distribution. So about 25 to 30%, maybe even 35% A's, 50 to 55% B's, and there will be C's, D's, and F's, but you have to really, really work to get there, right? Which means you miss the quizzes, you don't follow through on the project. So those are the ways you get there. Try not to go that route. So the dates are listed here. The valuation project is due in 2 parts, and I'll talk a little bit more about that next class to start the class. And the quiz dates are listed. The final exam, the date is, I think, finally in place. I'll put that on the Google Calendar as well. And the ground rules are basically there on how you can miss a quiz. As I said, if you want to make up a reason, at least make up a reason that's on this list. It is open book, open notes, and open laptop. Let me take that back. Open laptop, I can't do because you're beeping. Open iPads, devices, because many of you will have your lecture notes on those devices. If you have your lecture notes on your computer and you want to use it, just don't open up Excel on a computer not because it's going to give you some great advantage, but because this many people in a room like this, all with PCs open, and it can be messy, but it's open book, open notes, open devices for the class. Right. That's about it. I will see you on Wednesday. No?
Yeah.